The mass-produced Nikkes are probably some of the best quote-unquote fodder units I've ever seen in a piece of media. And that's due to both their amazing characterization and genius design. But let's start with the design first. Now, despite being the literal bottom of the bottom units in Nikke, like literally the free garbage units that they give you at the beginning just so you're able to form teams before you actually acquire better Nikkes, right? That's why their squad name is literally replace, because that's what you're meant to do. You're meant to, as soon as you acquire anything better, you're meant to replace them in your teams. They're not meant to be a permanent or even mainstay in your Nikkei teams, unlike some other lesser rarity units in other gacha games. That's why they are purposefully designed weak. Like the fact that every single one of them is at the bottom of the Nikkei tier list is no accident. They were designed to be weak, to be replaced. And that's something that's intentional, not even as purely a gameplay aspect, but it even correlates to their story, as we'll talk about later. But despite all that, the Nikkei team clearly did not use that as an opportunity to be lazy, as every single mass-produced unit in Nikkei is amazingly designed, to the point that a good portion of the fan base even believes that the mass-produced units have better designs than the actual unique units in the game. And while I personally do not agree with this assessment, I do understand where these people are coming from, as each mass-produced unit balances pretty well and in various levels, creating various paradoxically unique and memorable designs, the three elements of appealing character design, which are coolness, cuteness, and sexiness, which are, again, elements that every single mass produced unit has, even if to different degrees. That combined with an aesthetic that also perfectly balances the realistic and idealized as well as the modern and the sci-fi, creates designs that are simply perfect at capturing Nikke's whole vibe of being a waifu military shooter. And what elevates these designs from being simply well made into amazing, in my opinion, is two things specifically. One, that despite being so well designed and so unique and interesting and memorable in their own ways, they still fulfill their job, which is to be, well, mass produced units. Looking at them, you can perfectly visualize them as uniformized generic models, which compose a very large and mostly uniform looking unit or army, similar to the miniature characters you would see in an RTS, for example. So they managed to make designs that somehow look generic enough to fulfill their purpose within the story of being generic mass produced models, while at the same time making the designs unique and well produced enough to still be memorable and interesting. So that balance that they achieved was just, there are not no other words to describe it. It was just masterful what they did with the mass produced units in that aspect. And the other thing that elevates their designs for me is that despite being these generic models that are way more covered up and obviously way more realistic and for the most part less fan servicey than most of the other character designs in the game, right? they still do feel like Nikkes. When you look at both of these characters, you can believe that both of them are the same type of being and belong in the same universe. And that's because Nikkes aren't just regular old female soldiers. Because to make a long story short, the way you produce a Nikke is that you take a human female brain from a body, right? And then you construct a body based on that brain's idea of perfect female beauty. That's why every single Nikke looks like an attractive woman, because they're not just meant to be female soldiers, they're meant to be robotic soldiers based around what the original human brain envisioned as the perfect image of female beauty. And I think that was perfectly captured in the mass produced models because, again, despite being so much more realistic, so much more militarized, and far less fan servicey than the unique models, you can still feel that aspect that embodies a Nikke in them as much as you can in the unique models. When you look at both of these, you can see that, again, despite their differences, they both embody that idealized female beauty that defines what a Nikke is supposed to represent. They are, like the title of the game itself says, the goddesses of victory. And so you should feel that. You should feel that these are almost like angels. Like they are not simply meant to be normal as human female soldiers. They're meant to be these beacons, these icons of not only badassery but beauty that represent the hope of humanity, almost like superheroes. And the fact that they achieve that while still making the designs generic enough to fit with the mass produced nature of these units, as well as while obviously limiting a lot more their overall fan service in comparison to the unique models, is very commendable. The fact that they were able to perfectly capture that concept just as well with both the mass produced and the unique models, despite their various differences, which I think I've already highlighted enough, is, in my opinion, just amazing. It's a proof that the Nikke design department just understood their assignment and truly made something amazing with their truly realized, unique, and well thought out and executed setting that is reflected on even the simplest of their designs. Again, maybe it feels like I'm praising this way more than it deserves, but I really do believe that Nikke's design department is just amazing. Like, the purpose of this video is to highlight and praise the mass produced Nikkes specifically, but in general, I just think that Nikke's design department is truly worthy of a lot of praise in general. But anyway, what makes Nikke's mass produced models amazing is not just their designs, but also their role in the story. Since, as I mentioned before, they're meant to be fodder units. They're meant to be those background characters that die by the hundreds in a battle, exactly to show how powerful a threat the enemy is, right? And I think what elevates them above other characters of the sort is that Nikke, both through its events and the story chapters, as well as even the bond stories of some of the more unique Nikkes, really take the time to show that despite being of a generic model, despite being a bunch of units all with the same face, they are all still unique characters. Even if that uniqueness may not be reflected in their designs, like some of the rarer units, not like Rappy or Neon or Yan, etc., they all have just as unique personalities. Each Nikke, even the more generic looking ones, still have their own stories, their own dreams, their own aspirations and dispositions and personalities. And that is reflected again really well in the story, as you see Nikkes that, while each looking the same, every single one has a very unique character, showing you that even if the model is generic, the brains inside are obviously each one from a unique person. That even the most generic Nikkei models have just as developed and unique personality and a story as the more unique characters we're used to interacting. And while obviously the story can't dedicate the time to these characters, because again, they are meant to be more further background characters to actually make them as strong as some of the more uniquely named characters, at least for the most part, they still do enough to put that feeling in your head, to make you, every time you look at one of these mass produced units, to think, oh, that may look like a mass produced background, like sort of generic character, but I know the story has shown me, I understand looking at this, that even if we're not being shown that right now, that they are each one a unique character, which really helps to sell the tragedy of hundreds and thousands of them dying each battle. Because they're not just a secondary thought, a number in the back of your mind when you hear these statistics. Because despite them being treated like these disposable and like sort of whatever characters that most people, even in universe, don't care about dying, you know, because of how well a job the story did characterizing them, that they are all unique and important. And so, even in the face of that, you feel for the tragedy of so many of them dying. You understand what that actually means. You understand and feel for the tragedy of what actually happened. And the fact that Nikke does this, that obviously not to the same level, like you're not gonna feel as sad for even a bunch of mass produced Nikkes dying as you would for a more named character dying, like Uni or Biscuit or someone like that. But the fact that at any level besides just the understanding of the statistical number of, oh, a bunch of soldiers died, they make the fact that they make you care to any level deeper than that, in my opinion, elevates these fodder characters to a point that I feel every story should strive for. Like every story should try to make you understand and feel and care about the tragedy of so many people dying. There shouldn't just be a number that is meant to portray how strong an enemy is. That should be a genuine tragedy and something that you feel genuinely sad for, even to a lesser extent. And the fact that Nikke does that, to me, is simply amazing. A lot of people have already commended Nikke enough for their overall storytelling and quality writing, but I wanted to make this video mostly to praise that specific aspect, because it's one that I don't feel is mentioned enough by the community, and that I believe should be way more not only praised but acknowledged than it currently is. So yeah, in general, from their design to their own the story to how well executed and unique and interesting both of these are, as well as how it correlates to the gameplay and with some of the tinier aspects, some things that may just seem like random details or something more minor, like again the whole replace squad name. Just the work and the love that is given to even some of the more generic and throwaway units in the game is something amazing that I don't feel Nikke is praised enough for. Which is why, even if they are not the best, like I'm sure there are fodder characters in other media that are done even better than the mass produced Nikkes. Like, for example, I know that a lot of people love the clones in the Clone Wars cartoon for Star Wars, right? So, while I'm not going to claim that they are absolutely the best fodder unit in any piece of media ever made, they are certainly one of the best and personally my favorites. And while I think praised them enough in that regard for that message to be transmitted in a more subtle way, I'm just going to make that subtle message more in your face by saying, if you want to design a more realistic and less fan servicey military shooter with designs that are still appealing, are still cute and sexy and very anime waifu themed, I think that the mass produced Nikke designs are definitely something you should be inspired by, because to me they are the perfect balance between genuinely appealing waifu designs and a more realistic, grounded, and cool looking military aesthetic. If you want to make your own military waifu series with, again, a less fan servicey edge like the one found in most Nikkes and in something like Girls Frontline, for example, that's something I would encourage you to consider being inspired by. It's an aesthetic I definitely, again, while it's not my favorite, I definitely wouldn't mind seeing it done more often. And since this is a video about military based gacha games, and since I just praised the Nikke designs as something you should be inspired by, I know someone in my audience will say, oh, but what about Arc Knights? And you know what? I agree. What about Arc Knights? But yeah, with that, that will be it for this video. If you liked it, please do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc. And I do hope to see you on the next one, if that earlier joke didn't make you completely hate me, which if it did, I do understand, but I'm not apologizing for it. But anyway, yeah, that will be it for today. For now, though, as always, I bid you guys farewell. Obscure Anime out.